Hello and good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I am Chris Steyerwalt, filling in for the Blake Berman, and this is The Hill on NewsNation. First look tonight at the conversation between a top Trump official and Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. What did she say that got the convicted sex criminal moved to a nicer prison? OPSEC or payback? Federal agents raid the home of John Bolton, the former Trump national security advisor, turned sharp critic of the president on Russia.
Purposely don't want to really get involved in it. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. I thought he was a sleazebag, actually. And he suffers major Trump derangement syndrome, but so do a lot of people.
Speaking of Russia, Vladimir Putin's military intensifying its assault on Ukraine and its civilians as President Trump floats the possibility again of the U.S. walking away. Also tonight, hundreds of National Guard members are pouring into the nation's capital, some soon to be armed. The president threatening similar moves for other big cities. We'll tell you which one is at the top of his list. But we begin with a look at the Bethesda, Maryland home of former White House National Security Advisor and former ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, where a team of FBI agents carried out an early morning raid as part of an investigation into the potential mishandling of classified information. We have team coverage tonight. NewsNation contributor Mick Mulvaney, former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker join us in just a moment, but we start with NewsNation's Joe Khalil with the latest. Joe, what do you know?
Yeah, Chris, so our cameras were there in real time as John Bolton's home was being raided by FBI agents. They're not being specific about what they were looking for, but our sources have confirmed that it has something to do potentially with classified documents. Now, we heard earlier this morning that Vice President Vance confirmed there is an investigation into Bolton happening. It's in its early stages right now, but the vice president denied that any of this has anything to do with the fact that Bolton has been one of the harshest critics of President Trump, especially considering he is a Republican. And President Trump echoed that today, saying he had nothing to do with ordering what we saw today.
No, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife. He could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out.
Now, our viewers may remember that Bolton did have a security detail around him 24/7 over the last couple of years because he had a credible threat of assassination from the Iranian government for his role in the killing of Qasem Soleimani, that Iranian general. Just a few months ago, President Trump pulled that protection back. He canceled it, and Bolton is on the record just as recently as a couple of days ago, Chris, saying that he considers that move to be political retribution.
Joe, you're also, I know, this evening following the latest on the Jeffrey Epstein case and the release of the Ghislaine Maxwell interview. What do we know tonight about that?
Yeah, so the transcript of the interview that Ghislaine Maxwell did in prison with Todd Blanche, the number 2 at the Justice Department, has now been released. Some audio has been released of that interview as well. Just taking some of the highlights, it was pretty bulky, 263 pages. She talked about President Trump, her relationship with him, and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with him. And she was very complimentary of the president, saying here in part that Trump was always very cordial, very kind to me. I just want to say I admire the extraordinary achievement of becoming the president now. I like him, and I have always liked him. She also said she saw nothing with her own eyes inappropriate that President Trump did relating to massages or masseuses at Mar-a-Lago or at other places. She says she and Epstein were both there several occasions. She also mentioned President Bill Clinton and said he took 26 flights, but also says she didn't see anything in terms of inappropriate massages there either. Chris.
Joe Khalil, we thank you very much tonight. Okay, joining us now, former Assistant Director of the FBI, Chris Swecker. I want to start with you on the Maxwell case. It's highly unusual, of course, for the Deputy Attorney General to do an interview that might be more typically conducted by FBI agents. What was released today says that Maxwell, as you just heard, feels great about Donald Trump and offered no insights into the biggest question: who are the high-profile individuals that she and Epstein provided sexual favors for? So I just want to get your take on this breaking news tonight.
Yeah, Chris, I think this is one of the biggest non-stories of the year. I mean, of course, there's no list. I mean, when nefarious things happen, they don't make document it and make a list of it. What happened in the back of the plane or down at the island resort, it stays there. So, I don't think we'll ever know. And I think we ought to move on past this case, really. But I will comment on the deputy or a DOJ attorney conducting an interview like that is entirely inappropriate. If I were still head of the criminal division, I would tell the agents to put him on the FD 302 as a witness to the interview, as a participant, which would take him or her out of any trial, ability to work as a trial attorney on that case. But again, a non-story. I think this story is going to fade out fairly quickly now.
Okay. Speaking of highly unusual things to do, what do you make of the FBI raid today at John Bolton's house?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of record that I was very critical of the Mar-a-Lago raid. I was very critical of the use of the FBI as a weapon. So I'm looking at this a bit skeptically, as are many of my colleagues. We call ourselves the pre-Comey leadership team, if you will. So what we don't want to see is this playbook that was utilized in the prior administration, the Biden administration, just flipped over, and now we're doing it, using the same playbook, different team. So, I'm anxious to see the affidavit that supports the search warrant. If in the affidavit there's evidence and there's facts that say, look, there was true impact on national security, that this was a serious breach of security, then I'm okay with it, as will my colleagues be. But right now I'm very skeptical. None of us want to see the FBI used as a political weapon in any way. We want to get back to the days when they were apolitical, not influenced by any particular political party or president, and that they go back to being the elite agency that they should be.
Chris Swecker, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thanks for the insight. Okay, joining us now, former White House Chief of Staff and, of course, NewsNation political and economic contributor Mick Mulvaney. Brother Mulvaney, you have said in the past that when it comes to Trump payback against his political enemies, quote, what is the difference between payback or a revenge-a-thon and simply applying the same standards to other elected officials that have now been applied to Trump? That's what you wrote back in June in a piece, of course, in The Hill. Headline, quote, what's wrong with a little revenge? So do you think turnabout is fair play for John Bolton?
I do. In fact, I look at this sort of as a Rorschach test of sorts, which is if you thought what happened at Mar-a-Lago was okay, then you should be okay with this. If you thought what happened at Mar-a-Lago was wrong, then you might want to start raising some eyebrows about this. Keep in mind, this is very early. We don't know if there's more to it than just the material that Bolton took with him when he left the White House and apparently used for his book. If there's more than that here, then this sort of analysis goes out the window. If he's leaking to the press, if he's leaking to the Biden administration or Biden campaign, anything like that, then that's a different story. But just taken on its face, this simply looks like turnabout, which, according to Shakespeare, is indeed fair play.
Well, what do we do about an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right? What do we do when the next administration comes in and says, well, now you've stepped it up, and a new administration, when a Democrat takes over, says, and it'll be even worse. Isn't this just a ratchet effect, a race to the bottom?
It's a fair point, but let me see if I can put a more positive spin on it. For the last 25 years, hear me out on this. I know. The last 25 years, conservatives have been saying, look, they've been doing this to us, they've been doing this, and everybody sort of says, oh, you're just making that up. And now that it's working the other way, maybe enough people are saying, you know what, maybe those conservatives were right. Maybe the thing on Mar-a-Lago was wrong. Maybe going after conservative groups was wrong. Maybe going after any group based upon their philosophy is wrong. Since now it seems to be happening to the other side of the aisle, maybe everybody now comes together and says, okay, let's stop this. Until everybody admitted it was going on, it's never going to get fixed.
I think there was a guy one time who said there's no education in the second kick of a mule. But we will see. Maybe you are right. Okay. It was bad news is good news for market watchers today as the stocks rallied on word from Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell that an interest rate cut is coming as bad economic news keeps piling up. This comes as President Trump is seeking the ouster of one of the members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors for a squidgy mortgage application. Now, we know, you and I know, that critics of the administration will call an eventual rate cut bowing to pressure. How do you see it?
I got a different perspective on it. This is what concerns me for the Trump side of this equation. If the Fed does cut rates in September, you're right. A lot of folks will look at it and say, well, they only did it because Trump wanted them to do it. But if the result of that, or the result for any reason, is an increase in inflation, it's going to be Trump's inflation. If you're the person who says you have to lower rate, you have to lower rates, you have to lower rates, and they're saying, well, we don't want to lower rates because that might spike inflation, but they do it anyway, and they apparently cave to you, then whatever happens, you sort of own. And I think that's a risk the Trump team hasn't considered yet. Let's hope inflation is not around the corner, but certainly cutting rates is pro-inflationary by design.
Okay, you and I have talked before about what the Wall Street Journal called state capitalism with American characteristics. Another step toward a planned economy. Today, as the president announced taxpayers would be taking a 10% stake in chipmaker Intel. What's the deal? Make sense of this for us.
No, I can't, and I won't. At some point, you just got to throw your hands up and say, I'm not sure what's happening. But I'm pretty sure, Chris, that state ownership of the means of production is part of the basic definition of both socialism and communism. I'm not sure. I'm stunned that I'd have to have a conversation about this with Republican control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. If AOC was president and Elizabeth Warren ran the Senate, I could understand why we'd be talking about the dangers of government ownership of the means of production, all the ills that come from that. I never thought I'd have to have this conversation with Republicans in charge, but it looks to be the road that the White House wants to go down. They've now they talk about this share at Intel. They've taken a share in a critical minerals company. They're talking about doing a sovereign wealth fund. They have a golden share now ownership in U.S. Steel. This is not conservative small government politics. This is state ownership of the means of production.
Mick Mulvaney is back from his vacation destination, but he lost his collar along the way. We hope you find it in time for next week. We thank you, my friend. Okay, coming up, we're live from Ukraine. Russian attacks intensify as hopes for peace talks fade. We'll have the latest from our correspondent, Robert Sherman, on the ground in Kyiv. Plus this.
So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
Can he do that? As the Trump troop buildup in Washington continues, the president threatening boots on the ground in other big blue cities. Stay with us. The Hill will be right back. Welcome back. It's been just 4 days since President Trump's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a host of European leaders. They left the White House on a positive note about getting Russia to the negotiating table. Since then, nothing. Meanwhile, this week, Russian attacks on western Ukraine included a strike on a U.S.-owned factory making electronics components for household goods. President Trump saying today, we'll know more about the prospects for a deal between the two countries in, you guessed it, 2 weeks.
What are the 2 ways you can go at the end of 2 weeks then?
Well, then I'm going to make a decision as to what we do. And it's going to be a very important decision. And that's whether or not it's massive sanctions or massive tariffs or both. Or do we do nothing and say it's your fight?
NewsNation foreign correspondent Robert Sherman joins us now from Kyiv, where 2 weeks could be a very long time.
Very long time indeed, Chris, especially with this last week. Since that Alaska summit, we've seen Russia keeping up its intensity on Ukraine. That even includes today, while NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was on the ground here in Kyiv, sirens blared throughout the city. So no relenting coming from the Russian side. 1 day removed from that strike that was carried out on that American manufacturing facility, which President Trump says he's not happy about. President Zelensky, on the other hand, says he believes this is evidence that Russia is not serious about peace.
The Russians will try to do something else now to avoid a meeting. The issue is not just the meeting. The issue is that they don't want to end the war. A bilateral meeting is one of the components of how to end the war. It's not all. It's one of the components. And since they don't want to end it, they will look for space for it.
President Trump says that he wants to see both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin sitting down face to face before there's a trilateral using the U.S. But Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying in an interview with NBC, the timing just isn't right.
There is no meeting planned, and I'm not challenging this. But you cannot, I think, understand what I am saying. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all.
Nevertheless, President Putin saying that he believes there is a light at the end of the tunnel to all of this. President Trump clearly losing his patience, saying 2 weeks is the deadline. Otherwise, he's going to have to change course. Chris?
Robert Sherman, we thank you. Okay, joining us now to make sense of this is former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Ambassador Taylor, the last time you and I talked, it was on the eve of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. And you had pretty high hopes that American leverage could produce at least a ceasefire. Where are we now?
Well, President Trump went into that meeting, Chris, very strongly supporting and pushing for a ceasefire. That position had been agreed with the Europeans and with Zelensky a couple days prior to Anchorage. He went in and he said that if Putin didn't sit down for a ceasefire, didn't agree to a ceasefire, that he, Trump, would put on big sanctions. But President Trump sat down with President Putin. President Putin apparently talked him out of it. And President Putin then also diverted the talk of new big sanctions. Then when, as you've just reported, and Robert just reported, when President Trump sat down with the Europeans and Zelensky on Monday of this week, they started moving back towards a ceasefire, and also good talk of security assurances, security guarantees. There was some progress made on Monday. And as you just reported again, President Trump has now said, if it doesn't happen in 2 weeks, big sanctions, big problems for Putin.
Okay. I'd like you to listen to what former Vice President Mike Pence had to say about that to my colleague Blake Berman on Thursday.
If we pass those secondary sanctions, Vladimir Putin will understand that we could literally break their economy. And by providing continued military support for Ukraine, that combination of efforts, I think, is the best pathway to peace.
Now, there's a broad consensus, it seems like, in the foreign policy world that that's the way to go. But I heard the president today say maybe we just walk away and let them fight it out. Are we moving away from the idea of those sanctions?
I don't think so, Chris. I think the president is so committed, is so invested. I just can't see him walking away. Walking away is throwing his hands up. Walking away is saying that Putin wins, that he out-negotiated him. No, I certainly can't see the president or the United States walking away from this. We've got a lot invested. It's important to us. President Trump wants to win this. He can do it if he uses the sanctions, uses the leverage he's got.
Okay, does the Russian attack on a U.S.-owned factory in western Ukraine change the dynamic here?
It brings it home. It just makes the point that the Russians are not serious about a ceasefire. They're not serious about ending the war. They are serious about doing grave damage to Ukraine. They want to just batter Ukraine until Ukraine capitulates, which they will never do. The Ukrainians will not give up, and we shouldn't give up. Europeans are not going to give up. But this attack on an American firm in Ukraine demonstrates who is in favor of peace and who's not.
Ambassador Taylor, we thank you, as always, for your time and your insight this Friday evening. Okay, there's still much more ahead for you on the Hill. President Trump says Chicago and New York are next for his crackdown. But what about crime in red states? We'll talk with the key Republican about that. And cracking up over Cracker Barrel, the Sydney Sweeney moment for a favorite fast casual restaurant, when the Hill returns. Welcome back. I'm Chris Stirewalt, filling in for our friend Blake Berman. There are a lot of concerns in Washington about presidential overreach as red state governors continue to send National Guard members to patrol the streets, and the administration prepares to arm those soldiers instead of them just filling support roles for the police. But even the sharpest critic of the administration couldn't deny that the troops and newly deployed federal law enforcement officers are making a difference on crime. Since the federal takeover on August 11th, there have been 630 arrests and counting, according to the White House. And this has been the longest period without a homicide in Washington since March. In June, though, 21-year-old congressional intern Eric Tarpinian-Jochum was an innocent bystander as a dispute outside a Northwest D.C. metro station turned to gunplay. His mom recently joined NewsNation's Marnie Hughes to talk about the loss of her son.
It's not just my son. There's 100 homicides now. There's one every other day in D.C. So, yes, my son took the bullets for somebody else. However, everybody is at risk in D.C.
Tarpinian-Jochum had been assigned to the office of Kansas Republican Ron Estes. He joins us now. Congressman, thank you for being with us. Your intern's death was one of the more recent in a long list of tragic tales of young people who came to Washington to be part of the government, follow their dreams, and wound up as victims of violent crime. But Congress has the principal responsibility to oversee the federal district. Why didn't Congress act on this before? Why did it take so long? Why did it take a presidential intervention?
Yeah, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is the District of Columbia. It was intentionally set up to be under federal responsibility. Now, over the years, we've created some laws that, they have a mayor, form of government, and council to have responsibility for that. But it's different than the states. One of the things that we run into is that a lot of responsibility and authority is delegated to the executive branch to do the roles that they have. And, as we've seen, as you highlighted just there, that, it's terrible, the crime rate that's been going on in Washington, D.C. And as a parent myself, I want a city that's safe for all of our children to come to, and certainly as our nation's capital, I want to make sure that we don't have a crime rate and a murder rate that's higher than Mexico City or Islamabad or any other capital around the world.
Well, it doesn't have as high a murder rate as some cities in the United States. The president's talking about sending troops to some of those places. He highlights Chicago and New York, but there are places in red states, too, like Memphis, Tennessee, in Republican states where the crime rate is very high. How do you feel about the idea of deploying troops, nationalizing the National Guard in cities other than Washington, D.C., where you are 100% right? This is a federal district under federal control. How does it change when you go outside of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, one of the things as we think about our republic is we intentionally designed it. It was intentionally designed by the founding fathers to have states, and they had responsibilities for their jurisdictions within that state. Obviously different, as we said earlier, than the District of Columbia. One of the things we do know is that we spend a lot of taxpayer dollars that are handed out to cities and states to make sure that they're utilized for law enforcement, for protecting Americans within the cities. And I would always be on the side of let's look at ways that we can make sure that we can protect Americans throughout the country.
Okay, the president is talking about a $2 billion fund for beautification in Washington, D.C. You guys have been cutting for D.C., not increasing the budget. How does $2 billion for D.C. Beautiful sound to you?
I think there's a lot of things that we need to do. We want to have pride in our nation's capital. We want to make sure that it is outstanding when people come to visit. And obviously there's a cost associated with that. But we also have a $2 trillion deficit every year that gets added to our debt. And we've got to be focused on a lot of those decisions, making sure that we're making the right use and the best use of federal taxpayer money that they come into us.
All right, before I turn you loose, I have to ask you, my colleague Mick Mulvaney blew his stack earlier in the show talking about the 10% stake that the government is going to take in the struggling microchip maker Intel as a condition of receiving the monies appropriated by Congress to boost the industry. Why should the government own part of a microchip company?
I think one of those things that you get into is if you're handing out federal taxpayer dollars, you want to make sure that you get a return for that there's a benefit for that. A lot of times it's the number of jobs, it's the amount of investment that's made in a community. This is an interesting way that President Trump's brought up in terms of looking at ownership. Now, I don't want the federal government owning and controlling businesses. That's the approach that China and some of the communist countries want. So we want to make sure that we still maintain our good free markets and free capital ownership in order to make sure that we continue to have a thriving economy that we have.
Okay, if you had ever taken a smooth ride through the town of Sedan, Kansas, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Ron Estes. We thank you. Okay, now let's go to the other side of the aisle. Joining us is Arizona Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton. Congressman, staying with that same topic just for a minute, some Republicans are going to say that there's no difference between Donald Trump getting America into the microchip business and Barack Obama bailing out General Motors and Chrysler. How does all of this sit with you?
Well, I'm a capitalist, and I'm very frustrated that the president has made this move. He's claimed that the United States now has a 10% stake in one of our most important American companies. He said he got it for $0.00, that they had to give up nothing to get this stake. I don't know what that is. It does sound like a slide towards socialism. It's very, very frustrating. Look, I support Intel. Intel has major manufacturing facilities in my district. I supported strongly the CHIPS and Science Act, which improved workforce development in this most important industry. It made sure we invested in science in this semiconductor industry so we could stay ahead of China. And it was direct investment in these companies to help them grow this industry, grow jobs so we could be competitive. We don't want semiconductors. We needed to have secure supply chain so that China doesn't have any involvement in our supply chain. So I supported the CHIPS and Science Act, but this movement where we actually have an equity stake in a private sector company like this, that's not capitalism. That's a step in the wrong direction.
Okay, I'd also like to get your reaction to the news. Big news tonight on the raid on John Bolton's house. We've heard Republicans basically say, well, this is the Trump administration doing what the Biden administration did before it, particularly to Donald Trump and his classified documents. Are these just the new rules of the game?
I hope not. Look, I want to wait and see exactly what the legal documents justifying this raid say. Obviously, John Bolton in the past had been accused of issues with his book and putting classified information in his book. I thought that case was closed against John Bolton. I was very surprised when I woke up this morning and read that there had been a raid on him. I am concerned about the president openly claiming he wants retribution on certain people and this pattern seemingly going after perceived enemies of the president, not just John Bolton, but great people like Senator Adam Schiff or the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, and so many others. This cannot become America where we use the power of government to engage in retribution.
Okay, the New York Times this week really bummed out a lot of Democrats because it had a very troubling report for your party that said it's bleeding voter registrations, down about 2 million since 2020, just in the states where we can track it on a partisan basis. There has been a lot of buzz this week about California Governor Gavin Newsom's new troll-on-troll approach online with Donald Trump. A lot of Democrats say it's time to fight fire with fire, right? You got to deal with Trump, and that applies to redistricting, that applies to rhetoric and all that stuff. Excuse me. I want to talk to you about that as an idea for shoring up your party's slide, particularly with young voters. Is it about getting in their face, being the way they are, plotting a different course? What do you advise?
Okay, well, look, the issue itself in terms of the decrease in people choosing to join the Democratic Party vis-a-vis the Republican Party, the truth is that more people are choosing neither party. They're becoming independent, and independents are by far the fastest growing category of new voters. But we have to come to terms with that. That's a very serious issue, and we need to make sure we are laser focused on delivering a message that shows that we are strong on economics, on job growth, of helping young people, helping the middle class and the working class. And when we get away from that core message, that's when we lose support. As it relates to Governor Newsom, look, his tweets are pretty darn funny. They point out the ridiculousness of the president's tweets, and so they're very entertaining. But we're not going to win elections based on clever tweets. We're going to win elections when people trust us and that we can appeal not just to Democrats, but to independents and even moderate Republicans. I'm on the House side. I'm not worried about the 2028 presidential election. A lot of this is presidential jockeying. I want to win the 2026 election and win the majority in the House of Representatives. And how we're going to win the majority in the House of Representatives and bring back much needed checks and balances in the government is to have a message that wins over not just Democrats, but independents and moderate Republicans. And that is making sure people feel confident that we're laser focused on building the strongest economy in America, rising wages, lowering these tariffs, lowering costs, making housing more accessible. These are the issues that people care about much more than clever tweets.
Okay, America, if you are heading to the Arizona State Sun Devils home opener next Saturday against Northern Arizona in Tempe, you'd know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Greg Stanton. There you go. We thank you. Okay, coming up, a judge takes a bite out of alligator Alcatraz. We'll explain. And did you see this in the White House today? President Trump and the World Cup trophy. Soccer? What's that all about? A look at what's trending next.
Look how big the storm is.
A doomsday scenario.
Houses are gone. People have lost all their stuff. People here are suffering.
Decades later, the scars remain, and we remember.
The Hurricane Katrina tapes, Sunday at 8/7 Central on NewsNation.
See you later, alligator. Alligator Alcatraz. Welcome back to the Hill. A federal judge has put a halt to any immigrant detainees being sent to the detention center in the Florida Everglades that Governor Ron DeSantis was having built to boost President Trump's mass deportation efforts. Judge Kathleen Williams also ruled that the government must begin dismantling the facility and has 60 days to move out all current detainees. The ruling rebuked both the state and federal governments for ignoring environmental rules meant to protect the swamps and the local tribal population. The full panel with us now. Julie Manchester, J-Man, she's a national political reporter for The Hill. Our friend Sabrina Siddiqui, she's a national politics reporter for The Wall Street Journal. Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump White House. And Lori A. Watkins, former policy advisor to President Barack Obama. Bill, I want to start with you. Even if you don't agree with this judge's decision down in Florida, how likely do you think it is that it will stand up on appeal?
Very unlikely. I think we've seen this across the country on a variety of issues where these district court judges, these activists, have really tried to substitute their judgment for that of the President of the United States. I know she tried to use the environmental laws as a basis for her decision. The state of Florida and the administration have announced their intent to appeal. They'll also go for a stay. I think that the briefing is really going to emphasize the national security and public safety aspects of this matter. And I would expect the appellate court, if not the Supreme Court, to uphold the Trump administration and Governor DeSantis' actions here.
Okay, Sabrina, Republicans in Texas are basing their bid to gerrymander their way into retaining the House majority for Republicans on the GOP's improved showing with Hispanic voters in the 2024 election. But a host of new polling suggests that moves like, I don't know, building mass detention camps with cutesy names is hurting Republicans with the voters that they seem to covet so much just a few months ago. Is there some danger here for Republicans on backlash on the immigration hardline?
I think in general, what we've seen on immigration is that a majority of Americans do support deporting undocumented immigrants, those who are believed to have come to the U.S. illegally. But what we found in our Wall Street Journal polling, including some polling that we just did in the past month, is that there is a majority of Americans who believe that a very aggressive tactics the Trump administration is using in its crackdown have gone too far. So just by way of example, we found that 58% of voters believe that undocumented immigrants, deporting them without giving them access to a judge or a hearing is unpopular. And they also do not support deporting immigrants to countries where they have no personal ties. So, it's not just with the Latino voters that Republicans gained traction with in the last election. I think it's also a problem with independents and suburban voters in swing districts if what they see is not just getting rid of criminals, but putting them in camps with poor conditions and also also going into people's neighborhoods and rounding up, immigrants who are contributing to society, working in restaurants, showing up at churches, schools. All of that is very much unpopular and could imperil Trump's standing on immigration.
Okay, Julia, Democrats think a lot about Jeffrey Epstein. They think about Jeffrey Epstein so much that some of them are saying that the raid on John Bolton's house is actually an attempted distraction on the day that the first batch of Epstein files were released. But based on what I can gather so far, what was released was good for Trump in that a federal convict told the president's former personal lawyer that his boss was a perfect gentleman. He was the best. Is this release, though, going to quiet Republican demands for more on Epstein and Trump?
I don't think it will, Chris. I think from that very conservative MAGA base, they're going to continue to demand answers. And remember, we're going to see more batches of these documents that were given to the House Oversight Committee earlier today released. The House Oversight Committee has said that they will go over these documents and then publicize them. And I think there really is a demand for them, particularly these documents and more information, particularly among that very MAGA, very conservative base. Not all Republicans, but that base that's so important to President Trump. I also think Democrats are going to very much continue to push this as a main storyline. We have House Oversight Committee ranking member Robert Garcia releasing a statement today, essentially questioning Ghislaine Maxwell's, her comments and saying she's a liar and questioning how honest she's being. So this is going to continue to be a story, and it's going to be a drip, no matter if the administration is making this a distraction, no matter if they continue to sort of pull this.
Okay, Lori, moderate Democratic group Third Way is out with a list of naughty words that they wish Democrats would stop using. On the list was privilege, othering, LGBTQIA++. There are a bunch of other cringy buzzwords on the list. I wonder how you think this fits in with a sort of a Democratic rebrand to make the party more accessible to working class voters.
Well, I wish that they would have put out a memo that was focusing on the economy and areas that the Democrats should be communicating more effectively on than just these buzzwords, but they should not be using these words. As this report said, they should be focusing solely on the economy, on affordability. Every single room that I am in, whether it's Democrats, moderates, conservatives, MAGA Republicans, everybody is focused on this economy. Affordability, whether or not people can afford housing, their groceries, the price of tariffs increasing everything, the price of insurance, the price of your Wi-Fi and your cable going up. Every single thing is increasing, and they need to focus on that. So the more that Democrats have the lowest approval rating that they've had since World War II. We're at 33%. That is abysmal. And if people think that there's going to be this big blue wave come 2026, I think that they are sadly mistaken unless they start getting their strategic messaging correct.
She just gave you all a harumph, Democrats. Okay, Bill, about 5 minutes ago in cultural time, Republicans were absolutely giddy at mocking a handful of progressives who were upset with the Blue Jean Company's advertisement featuring Sydney Sweeney and her jeans. And yet, I observed in the past 24 hours, your party freak out over a company changing its sign. Why are Republicans so upset about Cracker Barrel and its logo? Please decipher for us what is going on.
Look, I think, it's one of these things where you have iconic brands that try to update to the times. Unfortunately, some of these brands are still stuck in the Biden administration era where cancel culture and everything else was really trying to dictate it. And I think Cracker Barrel, with their new logo, abandoned what a lot of folks liked about the company. And I think that they started to speak out. I think compared to Sydney Sweeney and the jeans ad, I think what they're looking for is kind of a return to kind of common sense, family-oriented, and basically straight up American greatness when they're talking about their products and their services that they're giving. And so I think that all of this is consistent. So
very quickly, well, I need a show of hands from the panel. Has everybody here eaten at a Cracker Barrel? Wow. Oh, okay. Oh, well, Bill barely put his hand up. Who here has eaten at a Cracker Barrel within the past 6 months?
No.
My hand is still up.
Oh.
That's right, America. That's right. Panel, we thank you. Coming up, from Commander-in-Chief to Goalkeeper-in-Chief, President Trump makes an announcement about soccer. Okay, sure. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she's following the developments out of California regarding a missing 7-month-old baby. That's straight ahead at 7 o'clock. The Hill will be right back. Welcome back to The Hill, and now's a good time to catch up on some of the stories that are currently trending on thehill.com, starting with what? Kash Patel posts cryptic message amid Bolton raid. The director of the FBI, minutes after the agency he leads raided the home of the former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Patel posted to social media, quote, "No one is above the law, FBI agents on a mission." No other explanation was provided, but I think we can probably guess. Also trending, Florida removes rainbow crosswalk outside Pulse nightclub. There's a colorful tribute to the 49 people who were murdered in a mass shooting 8 years ago. It was painted over in the middle of the night. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis saying on social media, "We will not allow our state roads to be commandeered for political purposes." But locals did go out and repaint it themselves. And finally, Trump 2026 World Cup draw will be held at Kennedy Center. The president making the announcement. About 1 billion people around the world will be tuning in this December 5th to hear the pairings and the groups in the upcoming 2026 World Cup in North America. Check out these stories and more. Just scan the QR code on your screen or visit thehill.com. And before we go, be sure to catch The Hill Sunday this weekend. We'll be talking to the Republican senator from Missouri, Eric Schmidt, former Democratic senator from Alabama, Doug Jones, and our best in the business panel of journalists. It's awful good. We hope you'll come. 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central on Sunday.